Hello, everyone, and welcome to opening the next chapter in the Science of Reading with Amplify CKLA. We are so sorry that we had to reschedule this, and we're so glad that you made it here with us today. Everyone who is registered for this webinar will receive an email with a link to the recording, so please feel free to share it with any colleagues that were unable to make it today. My name is Laura Almazara, and I work with the literacy team here at Amplify. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll get that recording link to rewatch or share as you'd like. Everyone here with us today will also receive a certificate of attendance in that same email. If you want to access closed captions, click the Show Captions button in the bottom tray. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A and we'll try to get to them at the end. And we also welcome comments in the chat. So to start, let's find out where everyone is joining us from. I am in sunny Phoenix, but we have a slightly chilly day today, which I am thrilled for. Iowa, North Carolina, Massachusetts. Got a nice spread of the country here. Keep those responses coming in. In the meantime, I wanted to introduce our wonderful presenters today. We have Carissa Snyder and Trisha Metzel, who are Amplify Literacy Specialists. So take it away, Trisha and Carissa.
Yeah, perfect. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you all. I'm coming to you from my beautiful state of Colorado, where I think we're supposed to get some snow tomorrow or in a couple of days, but I think it's supposed to be warming up here pretty soon. As we jump into CKLA, when we think about what it truly takes for a child to become a confident reader and writer, we know it's not just one thing, right? We know it's not just decoding, it's not just comprehension, it isn't just writing, it's all of it working together. But taught at the right time, it needs to be done in the right way, but with also the right support. And that's the heart of CKLA. It is a comprehensive literacy program built on two essential strands: foundational skills and content-rich knowledge. And together, these strands are going to support students not in just becoming readers, but thinkers, communicators, and also lifelong learners. Before we jump into CKLA, we're going to just quickly introduce ourselves. Again, my name is Carissa Snyder, and I'm a former classroom teacher here in Colorado. And in the past several years, I have had the opportunity to work with a variety of educators from coast to coast and internationally as well in supporting them with looking and implementing CKLA. So I really know what it feels like when you want what is best for your students and to need a program that also actually works. And I'm really excited to be walking through parts of CKLA with you so that way we can do exactly that. Joining me today is my wonderful colleague, Trisha. She also brings a wealth of knowledge, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Carissa. Hi, I'm Trisha, and I, like Carissa, work with schools and districts to support their literacy adoptions. But I usually do this in person, so virtual is a new world for me. Loving it, but definitely a new world. And as a former classroom teacher, instructional coach, literacy coordinator, school leader, division leader, I too completely understand what it goes to, what you guys go through on your day-to-day basis as teachers, and I love supporting you in that success. So today and together, we're going to walk you through CKLA, and we're going to show you how it connects to a larger research-backed approach to foundational literacy instruction. So we're going to go ahead and look at that comprehensive literacy suite. So at Amplify, we have this comprehensive literacy ecosystem that was developed to ensure that students' needs are met. And the products within that literacy suite have this same DNA, meaning they work together and they work in tandem with CKLA, but they also work with MClass. And MClass is powered by DIBELS 8. And this includes a benchmark assessment, a dyslexia screener, and progress monitoring. Data from MClass then helps inform instruction. It connects to MClass intervention, and it places students on a personalized learning path within Boost Reading. And Boost Reading is a gamified, adaptive program that's built with skills and skill practice built in together. And it provides that effortless differentiation to both challenge students, but also to support those that have learning gaps. And it provides that explicit and systematic practice that aligns with the scope and sequence of CKLA. And for teachers, it gives you that immediate feedback for student performance. And it all ties directly back to CKLA. And this is that strong, robust Tier 1 instruction. It's a comprehensive literacy program that really focuses on building those foundational skills while deepening students' knowledge.
So now that we've kind of seen the bigger picture and how Amplify's early literacy suite and just having a healthy ecosystem works together, right? We want to make sure we have an assessment with M-Class or from Boost Reading with more personalized instruction. And then, of course, CKLA, the foundation for everything. You might be thinking, though, but what is the most important thing when you look for and when you're choosing a literacy program? So in the chat, if you can type in what is the most important thing to you? Is it proven results? Are you someone who's analytical like myself and you want to see different case studies? Are you someone also who it needs to have a strong alignment within the science of reading, right? The latest research. Or are you looking for, I want to have high quality instructional materials, but I also want to make sure that teachers are getting well supported. So in the chat, if you want to type in what is the most important thing to you when you're looking and choosing a literacy program. Alignment with the science of reading is what we see. With results, of course. Alignment with SOR is what Matt says. A tie to the science of reading, and of course, teacher support. Yeah, and what we're kind of seeing, and I see a trend here, is that we want to see science of reading, but we also want to see a variety of different things. And thanks again for sharing that in the chat. And we know that there's no clear answer. When I ask this question in different presentations, there's a variety of different answers because we want them all, right? And the good news is with CKLA, you don't have to choose. CKLA has a strong track record of impact. One example comes out of West Jefferson Hills in Pennsylvania. This district has about 3,300 students, and they began in a pilot. That's the data that you see down there at the bottom. They moved into full implementation, and then over 2 years, they saw that steady measurable growth in different literacy outcomes. As Kimberly from West Jefferson Hills says, CKLA isn't just an old basal program, but it's the structure and the coherence that makes the difference. And so that's really what makes the structure so powerful is CKLA is more than just a reading program. It is a full literacy solution. Students don't just have to practice isolated skills when they're reading or when they're writing or speaking, and they build everything together every single day. The foundational skills when they're going through vocabulary and writing and rich content, it all comes together in a way that feels seamless, but also it needs to be intentional because in CKLA with teachers, it is. And when all of it is in one place, the next question is, and kind of what I've seen in the chat is it has to be doable for the people who are teaching it, for educators, right? CKLA is built with teachers in mind. Every lesson is fully guided with clear objectives. There's modeled language. We have built-in assessments. So it really takes out the guesswork on what to teach or how I'm going to teach it. We'll look at some different digital tools and printed materials. So that way you're not left pulling different resources from 5 different places like I used to do just to get through the day. Because everything is going to be aligned and thorough. It has been designed for educators to have the space to focus on with their students, and they're not just managing different logistics. And when we take a step back and we go and we ask ourselves the why behind CKLA, because it isn't just a curriculum, it's built on a foundation of research and it reflects on what we know about how students learn how to read. Because the science of reading shows us that students need 2 things to become successful readers. They need to have strong word recognition, but they also need to have deep knowledge comprehension. And CKLA was built around both, explicitly, continuously, but also with purpose. In CKLA, we'll look at the 2 different strands, whether it's the skills strand focusing on earlier foundational skills, or the knowledge strand where we're focusing on oral language competencies. But we want to make sure we're teaching each of these areas at the right time. So students aren't just guessing at words, but we want them to be able to understand that. And that's what happens day after day because we really want to see some real change. So when we talk about CKLA, we're really talking about change outcomes because yes, it was built on a foundation of excellence. It's not just about the accolades or the different data points, but it's about what works for students. CKLA wasn't retrofitted from a balanced literacy model, but from the very beginning, it was built on and around the science of reading purposefully, but also apologetically. It's structured, it's practical, it's engaging, it gives teachers tools to work and students confident content that they love. And all of this is going to come together, and it's when the outcome starts to shift. And as we're moving into the science of reading and we're talking about that, let's kind of go into what that looks like on how it feels maybe for you right now with Trisha when we think about the science of reading.
Yeah, so we know that there's been a lot of changes in education, and we're all feeling it. But how are you feeling? So take a moment to look at these pictures and then think about which one best represents how you're feeling about the science of reading at this point. So take a look at those for a second and then go ahead and put the letter of the image in the chat. And if you want to include an explanation, feel free to do so. Which one are you resonating with? A, yay! E, oh good, I love it. Lots of peaceful ones. F, yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure for lots of different reasons, right? And we all have different interpretations of the way that these images look, but ultimately we're all kind of in different places. We're all having aha moments about different things, and we know that science is always changing. And that's really what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to keep up with it all. So I really appreciate your insight and your feedback. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So, one thing that we've learned is that there's a core framework within that science, right? And that is the simple view of reading. Students need to have that language comprehension with the word recognition in order to become skilled readers. But there's also that simple view of writing. And students need to have the composition skills, excuse me, and transcription skills in order to become those skilled writers. Now, you're going to notice that the language comprehension and those composition skills are aligned, and the word recognition and the transcription skills are next to each other. And that's because these are reciprocal in nature. Skilled readers and skilled writers do very similar things.
And we're going to see all of that in CKLA's program structure because CKLA also takes a two-strand approach built around these two primary instructional strands. And these are going to be taught side by side, just depending on your different grade levels. So in kindergarten, first and second grade, we're going to focus on foundational skills, early reading and writing, like phonics, spelling, decoding. The knowledge strand builds listening comprehension, background knowledge, vocabulary, oral language, and that's done through read alouds. You'll have different interactive discussions, vocabulary experiences, and then you're going to see that these two components, when students are becoming increasingly automatic and increasingly strategic, they go into this integrated strand, and that begins in third grade, where these two strands come together, and we call that the integrated strand, where reading, writing, grammar, they're all embedded into knowledge-rich units. So we're going to go through this presentation so you can see each of these components and how they all work together. We're going to start first in the primary space in kindergarten, first and in second grade when we go through that two-strand approach. So the way that this might begin, or maybe you can imagine that a first grade classroom, they're coming in and they're starting first within foundational skills. They're going to engage into phonics and decoding. And then later on in the day, when they're coming back from lunch and recess, they're going to settle down with a content-rich read aloud, where they're talking about big ideas and building vocabulary, and they're strengthening their oral language. These two strands are going to make sure that students develop word recognition, but also language comprehension, and they do this simultaneously. And that's exactly as what we saw from the simple view of reading and reading science, that's what they recommend. So let's first go into the bottom part of the strand, because when we think about building foundational skills, these are those skills that build the foundation for everything else that comes after. In CKLA, kind of looking at the scope and sequence, CKLA is a little bit different. We take what's called a sounds first approach. So starting in the primary grades, like in pre-K or in kindergarten, we introduce those skills with sound. And a teacher may have different instruments like a bell or a drum, just to get students to count How many words did you hear in that sentence? And then we're going to move that and continue into our reading continuum with how many sounds did you hear in that word? Let's isolate the sound and omit the sound and segment those sounds, but we really want to build that strong foundation for everything else that comes after. Once we start to connect those sounds into the print, both in basic and alternative sound spellings. And this is because in our English language, we have 40, I think it's 44 different sound spellings. And it would be so much easier if we just had sounds. It would be that easy. It'd be so much easier if we just had those many different sound spellings. But we don't. We have about 150 different sound spellings. And that is why it's so difficult to teach little kids how to read, is because there's so many different ways to spell that sound. In CKLA, you do. You teach those 150 different sound spellings by the end of second grade. So that way, when they move into third, fourth, and fifth grade, they have all of this code knowledge. And then you're going to add more complex skills going into morphology, where we can look at different parts of a word, like a prefix, suffix, root words. How do all of these word parts work together to create meaning in the language? So here's our scope and sequence, lays the foundation, but then this is what it looks like when we bring it to life each day, kind of like in a lesson structure. Because CKLA takes a sounds first approach, when we introduce a sound spelling, it's done through phonemic awareness, followed by explicit phonics instruction. So students can engage in those different handwriting activities when they are applying those newly acquired sound spelling correspondences, both when they are writing them, but we also want them to build their fluency and automaticity when they are reading them in different connected texts. Alongside students practicing their reading and their writing in the foundational skills, you're also going to explicitly cover grammar instruction and the writing process. So in this way, students can learn those reading skills alongside their writing skills, and it makes it easier for them to make these daily connections in between reading, writing, but also language instruction. Each of these skills are organized in CKLA in skills units, just like the example that you see on the screen right here. We're going to look at a first grade example, skills 4. We can think of this as about middle of the year, but whenever you open up a teacher's guide, there's a couple of main planning resources. One of them is the primary focus of the lesson. These are going to be those clear objectives that you want your students to master, but we know as effective teachers, we want to constantly check in on our students, especially in those foundational years. So you can do that with this formative assessment, and they directly tie, but also align to the primary focus of the lesson. And you can review this either within your physical teacher's guides, or you can also do that online, where you can review and prep for everything. You have teacher presentation screens, which allows you to project those lessons onto your classroom screens, like your smart boards or Promethean boards. And as you're going into a CKLA lesson, you're going to notice that instruction is intentionally designed to spiral. What students are learning and building on today is based on what they practiced yesterday or weeks before, because we want to make sure they have ample opportunities to practice previously taught skills. In this example, students are practicing blending and segmenting, which is going to support and underlie reading and writing skills, right? They practice both decoding and also encoding. Reading and writing rely on those same foundational skills. And in CKLA, it's going to help students strengthen both, but also in repeated and intentional practice. After we've warmed up for about 5 to 10 minutes, this is what the lesson looks like when we're introducing that new skill. Just like the primary focus of the lesson said, we want to introduce the sound, and the students are going to get to hear that sound in different parts of a word. But we're doing exactly that. We're going to start with the sound before introducing the letter. We want to focus on the sound because it's going to help strengthen their phonemic awareness. We isolate it so students can build in their receptive language, but also their expressive language. Did they hear that sound correctly so they can produce that sound correctly? And then the lesson is going to do exactly as the primary focus of the lesson said. They're going to hear that sound in different parts of a word, like at the beginning, the middle, or maybe at the end, in words that they might be familiar with, so that way they can begin to analyze the sound. It's pretty simple, right? They're just listening, but it's also foundational because when we're thinking about this, we're building a brain that hears, it processes, but it's also starting to map those sounds into print. We're preparing them. And to support this, the class is going to get to listen to the sound together in CKLA's sound library, where it's going to play the sound. This is especially helpful for multilingual learners, for students with speech needs, but really for any student. It's going to model, and then they're going to get to hear it again and again and again. One of my favorite features about the sound library is, do you see that picture right there? Is we have different articulation videos, and it zooms in on a student's mouth so they can see the articulation of that new sound, which we know is helpful for every single student. And that's really one of the great, quiet strengths of CKLA is we want to make sure we're being intentional with everything that we do. By having them practice the sound and they have a strong grasp of it, this is now where we want to use our teacher's guides as that instructional roadmap to start to connect that sound into the print. And here's where you're going to go through that gradual release of responsibility, and students are going to get to open up their activity workbooks because it's their turn when they are getting to apply those newly acquired sound spelling correspondences. We want to make sure that this practice is deliberate as they're engaging in their decoding, their spelling, but it's also starting to build in those early transcription skills all at once. To help this, we're going to have a variety of different materials. Kind of like activity workbooks, you're going to have vowel and consonant code posters. And then when you're introducing the new sound spellings, you do it with a spelling card, kind of like this. And in the spelling card, do you see that blue bar right there? Take a guess. What do you think the blue bar means? So as you're thinking about it, maybe you're like, oh, it's two letters for one sound, right? Or how frequently it appears in a word. And that is correct. You can kiss your brain. Yes. So when you think about how many ways, or if I were to ask you the question, how many ways can you spell the sound? I bet you can think of a couple, right? We have ER, we have EAR like in earth, UR like in fur, IR like in sir. There are 6 different ways to spell that sound. But the most common and least ambiguous way to spell it is the ER sound spelling. So in CKLA, we teach that first. And the students are going to have a variety of different word awareness activities so they can internalize those different sound spelling, alternative sound spellings. Outside of the vowel and consonant code posters, you have a couple of other materials, but are not limited to the ones that we see on the screen. In kindergarten, you're going to have sounds posters to show on your walls or on your cabinets for the newly identified sounds. And then students in first and in second grade, they get these individual code charts, which are such a great way for students to be held accountable for the different sound spellings. Because when you have your bright-eyed, bushy-tailed first grader and they come up to you and they might say, Mrs. Snyder, how do you spell? We can tell them to be a leader of their learning, to go back into those code charts because they're color-coded, depending on if you've taught with a consonant, a vowel, or even an R-controlled vowel sound. And some of the different ways that you can use the materials is either with large letter cards where they are going through and practicing chaining, like the video that you see right now. They have large letter cards. They're building a CVC word man using a variety of modalities. She's about to say, Alakazam. And of course, like magic, a new student is coming up. They're building from that word man into main. But what we're also seeing is a crucial part to learning how to read. They're mapping speech sounds to print. They're using a variety of modalities to do that. And it really begins to pave the path into more formal reading opportunities when they're going to get to apply their knowledge in different decodables. So students are going to get to engage in a variety of different decodables within CKLA, but what makes the decodables unique is they come in the form of a chapter book. And as you're flipping through that chapter book, you're noticing that it still follows that very logical code progression in CKLA. You're going to notice that the readers are a blend of fiction and also nonfiction texts. They have reoccurring characters that students are going to grow to love. but at the foundation and the whole purpose of a decodable is so students can apply their skills. The decodables in CKLA, they're 100% decodable, which means that every student is going to get to feel this success and that aha moment when they're getting to say, I can read this. And it becomes one of those great moments that everyone gets to love. And within the decodables, the students will each have their own because you get a class set and they are available online with an audio enablement feature so students can actually even hear that text and they have access to that on the hub. The decodable for this unit, Skills 4, as we kind of saw it reoccurring, it's the Green Fern Zoo. The students are going to learn about a variety of different critters within the zoo, but this is also where they're going to practice their fluency and they're going to get to apply their code knowledge when they get to see the specific sound spellings in this unit, kind of like the ER sound spelling that's bolded in the picture that you see here. But then you're also going to see that there are some words or some parts of a word that are underlined. This goes into the tricky words. And you're going to have time in your instruction where you're teaching these tricky words to be sticky words. And they get to apply them in different contexts, and which is going to help them move towards that ultimate goal, which is reading comprehension. Not only within CKLA do you want students to be able to practice their decoding skills, but we also want them to comprehend this text orally. We want them to be able to discuss it with you, discuss it with each other, and we want them to be able to respond to the text. Here, this is where we're beginning to lay the groundwork for the writing process. But right now, it's just done at the sentence level where we're asking students to go back, tell me where you found this text evidence. But this will build into more formal writing opportunities where students are going to get to compose the different expected genres across different grade levels, but all knowing that we want to connect back to that connected text. Here, students are going to begin to see writing as a process. And in this example, students are going to be learning about, right, all of the different critters at the Green Fern Zoo. Their task is to be able to choose one. They're going to write an informational paragraph about one of those animals that they've just learned about. And when we think about this, right, we want students to be able to write fluently, just like we want them to be able to read fluently. This writing muscle begins a grade earlier in kindergarten, and we begin handwriting with a broken crayon. Are there any ideas as to maybe why we begin with a broken crayon? Why do you think we begin handwriting with a broken crayon? Any thoughts in the chat? You have a couple of seconds. Grip. That's one of them. Thanks, Neely. 2 snaps for you for being the first one. Fine motor development. Good job. Fine motor development. Traction, drag. Oh my gosh, Margaret, you guys are all correct. So, yes to those things. First, if you're a primary teacher, you're probably like, I have a variety of crayons. Some of them are broken in my class and some are unbroken. It's a great way to repurpose some broken crayons. Yes, the writing, the grip, right for fine motor skills, but then I think it was Margaret. Let me double check. Margaret, yeah. When we think about wax on paper, it has more friction than ink does. So it helps build those little muscles when they're going through prerequisite skills, going through strokes, right? Like vertical strokes, horizontal strokes. And that's because we know that wax has more friction than ink does, but we also have a lot of receptors in our fingertips and in our toes. So it helps them remember it a little bit better when they're going through some of these prerequisite skills, connecting those into the different sound spelling, into words, paragraphs. And then when they move into 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, they're even going to go into some cursive handwriting. And that is because when Tricia talked about the science of reading and the science of writing, those are reciprocal of one another. We want to teach them in tandem. And as you are teaching the skills in tandem, right? And the lesson is going beautifully because you're teaching it with integrity, but we have a class and maybe some students are just not getting it the first time. And that's okay. There's a variety of different built-in supports within CKLA. One of my favorite ones is this additional support. And it's my favorite because it's embedded tier 2 instructional activities, but right inside of your teacher's guide. It's right after the lesson, but also right before the next lesson begins. So you don't have to go onto a teachers pay teachers and pay for something else or find something in the filing cabinet. This is material that you can use to support your students who need more help in either mastering that code, so that way we can reinforce that targeted instruction. In quick summary, the foundational skills is really teaching the how we teach students to read through a sounds first approach, teaching reading and writing in tandem, applying their skills, but not only when they are writing, but when they read. But when we move to the top part of the strand, the knowledge strand, this emphasizes something totally different. This emphasizes the what students are learning about. And in here, it'll be the content, because students are going to be building their background knowledge, their content knowledge, their vocabulary, and they do that through a variety of different organized topics that do not only build in the grade level, but you're going to see that across different grade levels. Knowledge plays a huge role in reading comprehension, and I want to get to share with you a popular study, which is the baseball study. The baseball study here, before we go into it, and I want to talk to you about it, but I want you to play along with me. If you can look at this picture and tell me, what do you notice? So as you're looking at the image, what do you see? What stands out to you right away? The same numbers. Okay, so someone sees the same numbers. It's 42, the number 42. It's dusk. We look at the time of the day. Thanks, Neely. Some people I've heard in the past, the monuments, the skyline, it takes place in St. Louis because of the arch, right? Okay, this is perfect. And what you're seeing, and what for folks who are maybe watching this or you're driving, we're looking at baseball, right? And people are lined up, and one side has 42 and it's in blue, the other side is in red. They have their hand probably over their heart because they're probably listening to the national anthem. And then the flag is in the background. We have the arch. And so when we think about this, some of you might know, but this is actually Jackie Robinson Day, but others may not, and that's okay. But here's why it matters. The details that you picked up on, this connects to what you have in your background knowledge, and that is key into comprehension. We know that in this well-known study for reading comprehension by Rhett and Leslie, asked middle school students to read a passage about a baseball game, right? The students had a wide range of reading abilities, and they were all at different reading levels, as well as they all had different background knowledge on baseball. But what the study found is that students who knew more about baseball understood the passage better than those who weren't really strong readers, even though they weren't strong readers. So having that background knowledge is really important, because we know that low reading ability, but having a high background knowledge in baseball, the students outperformed those who were skilled readers, but they didn't know much about the game. So when we think about this study and how it kind of reveals something even bigger, knowledge can actually compensate for a skill. And here's kind of why. And in CKLA, building knowledge isn't just an afterthought, but it really is the backbone of comprehension. The visual that you see right here, all of these different topics are students, what they are going to encounter in reading passages. They may encounter some of these topics in high school, in high stakes tests, kind of like not only the testing that occurs in third grade, but when we think about like your ACT and the SAT, some of the topics are going to range from like natural disasters to historical figures, ecosystems, astronomy. Having comprehension, right, and being able to comprehend the text, students also need to know more than just decoding skills. They need to have vocabulary, background knowledge, and all of these are essential because we want to make sure we bring it all together. And in CKLA, we do exactly that. Before we go into the knowledge strand for kindergarten to second grade, I have a quick question to ask you. And this is, At what age do you think reading comprehension catches up to listening comprehension? At what age do you think reading comprehension catches up to listening comprehension? Third grade, fourth and fifth. Jillian says 13. A variety of different levels. Yep. And I've kind of heard never, right? Like if it's my husband, never, never catches up. Second or third grade. Perfect. Thank you so much for participating. As your thoughts are coming in, this is research from T.G. Stitch and his colleagues. And what they found, and if you want the article, it's on Reading Rockets, as well as we can probably send it after too. But in his research, he found that listening comprehension catches up to reading comprehension around the age of 13, which is pretty crazy, right? I would have thought, much like many of you, oh, for sure it's in third grade. That's when we have these standardized tests. No, it's in middle school. So when we think about this, right, and we know that kids can listen at a code, kind of like if you have a young student, pre-K, kindergarten, maybe let's say they're watching Animal Planet. And for the most part, what they're watching, they understand what's happening. But if you take that picture away and we gave them the script, it might be a different outcome because there's discrepancy between listening comprehension and reading comprehension. But in CKLA, we take advantage of that because students can listen. We know they can listen at a much more sophisticated level than they can decode. And this is where they're going to be building their knowledge through listening comprehension, doing that through a variety of read alouds, but they're not passively doing it. They're going to interact with you in different group discussions and vocabulary work. And all of this is going to center around topics like this. Students will be in a variety of different topics for about 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And as you're looking at these different topics, you'll notice that they are interdisciplinary topics, the science and the social studies, literature, the arts, and they're also interconnected. We want to make sure that students are moving from one topic to the next in different grade levels. So then that way they can better understand and comprehend the text when they are reading about them in third, fourth, and fifth grade. You may also notice that on this screen, I have a box around some select units. And that's because in CKLA, you have this unique option called a choice unit. So a choice unit gives a district the opportunity to choose a topic for different units. And this is going to be an option for you from kindergarten to fifth grade. So let's kind of look at one of the different grade levels in isolation. And what I mean when I say you choose a topic for a unit, what does that mean? So this is first grade. In first grade, a choice unit happens to be Unit 8 and Unit 9. So 1 through 7, those are all of our static units. And then once we hit Unit 8, we have a choice. Our options are fairy tales or the history of the earth, right? And as a district, maybe we're thinking about that, right? I have an idea of which one I would like, but maybe you have an idea of which one you might like. And then Unit 9 is also a choice unit. Your options are Early World Civilization or Maya, Aztec, and Inca. And the district or the school at Amplify Elementary, they decided on fairy tales and early world civilizations for their class. And that's perfect, maybe because teachers felt more comfortable with these units over the other. In third, fourth, and fifth grade, you also have choice units, and they've evolved into full range novels where you get the option to either choose this novel or that one. So in third grade, for example, your option is either Charlotte's Web, right? Maybe you choose it because it's a classic, it's nostalgic, and that's why you chose it. Or because of those same reasons and you already know the story, you choose Stella Diaz has something to say. But again, it's completely on your choice. And one of the best things about it is you're not missing out if you choose one unit over the other because all of your standards are going to be covered regardless of the unit that you choose. If you're someone like me and you're like, I kind of like some parameters and I want to see the different pathways, we also have a choice units pathway that talks about if you went this direction, this is kind of the the theme that you're kind of going into. Another uniqueness about CKLA is you're going to have culminating research units, and these are the very last unit in the knowledge progression. So students are going to go through and conduct research, and they're going to take all of the knowledge that they've learned over the year, whether it's kindergarten to second grade, their skills and their knowledge building, or in the integrated strand, and they're going to conduct some research. And they're going to go through primary and secondary sources, and they're going to answer a question. And then they're going to get to present this research to the class. As they're moving through different writing, we want to make sure that they can also talk about that instruction. As we move into the knowledge section, here is where we're going to look at a kindergarten lesson. So in CKLA, here is where we're going to go through different content-rich read-alouds. So we're going to go through, and as they're going through different content-rich read-alouds, these will be the different read-alouds on the topic of geography in kindergarten. So you're looking at the different topics. It is going to go through, and you're going to teach them about the different continents, and you're going to help young kindergartners answer big questions like, but where am I when we're looking at some of these places? And where are some of these places? And then we know that some students don't have the same background knowledge. So we're going to also have universal access. So that way, students who don't have the same background knowledge, we kind of want to level set with them. And here are some different modifications you can use for that lesson. Spiraling is going to continue within the knowledge strand, where we're going to review what was already covered in this domain. So that way students can successfully create those meaningful connections into their new learning. And as we're going a little bit deeper into other embedded supports, you're going to find more personalized instruction on the sidebar of a teacher's guide. So for some students who need more assistance, the support is a really good support. And then for the world-class travelers, the challenge is a great extension. Directly in line to the lesson is where you're going to see your multilingual and English language supports. We know that all students come in a variety of different levels, so here's where you can use that different layered scaffolding to support the different learners. And as we have this and we're bringing the accessibility to life in the read aloud, here's kind of the hallmark of CKLA in the knowledge strand from kindergarten to second grade, is you're going to have a new read aloud a day. And in this scenario, the students are going to be learning about the different continents. And as they're learning from the different continents, they're listening to you because you are reading from your teacher's guide. And as you're reading from your teacher's guides, you're showing these different images on your smartboard or Promethean board, sparking their curiosity, but also easing the challenge of having to decode this advanced text. You may also notice that there's highlighted sections in the teacher's guide right there. That's intentional. That's where you're going to maybe pause and prompt some quick discussions, or maybe you're clarifying some tricky concepts, but you're deepening their comprehension here. This is kind of where you're modeling reading comprehension. What do we do naturally as good readers? You want to show it to your students. And this is really helpful when we're connecting them back into that read aloud. The read alouds are going to have different vocabulary, and we refer to that as word work in CKLA, where they're going to follow the same 6-step process. They're hearing the word, they're getting to practice it in context. Like in this example, the word is location, and now they're using it to say that location is at school and that location is not at school. And as they're moving through the read aloud, they have questions throughout it, and then you're going to notice that there are questions even after that read aloud. Those are going to range from literal questions to evaluative, summative questions, and we want to always encourage our students to answer those questions in complete sentences because it helps them when they begin to put pencil to paper in different built-in writing practice. This example here, the students are practicing to write a complete sentence. They're identifying the subject and the predicate, which we know is going to help them stay on track when they're moving through the writing process. In this domain, the students are going to get to practice informational texts or writing about informational texts when they're focusing on details. And then they have a culminating writing project where they are going to get to talk about a place that they've chosen from the different continents. They need to tell you, where did they go, how far was it, and how did they get there? And then from here, this is where you're teaching both of these different strands. And Trisha is going to continue when these two strands come together in the integrated strand. You are muted, Trisha.
And I did that just to keep the dog from barking, so I apologize for that. All right, so Carissa talked a little bit about the knowledge strand and the skill strand in K2, and so we are going to move on to that integrated strand like Carissa had mentioned. So in the integrated strand, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, teachers are going to use that rich content as the vehicle of their ELA instruction. Everything is going to be centered around that text, and nothing is going to be taught in isolation. So in 3rd grade, those instructional times still 120 minutes with an option of a 15-minute or 30-minute skills component. And then in 4th and 5th grade, the instructional time is 90 minutes. Now, one of CKLA's key features is that systematic approach to building background knowledge. And this is achieved through that integrated social studies and science topics. So by systematically building background knowledge and making those connections to texts that they're reading, students are going to have that deeper understanding of the content, and they're going to be better prepared to comprehend and analyze those complex texts. Now, this approach not only enhances the learning experience, but it also really prepares students for the success for their future academics. Well, if students are reading texts like this, how did we get them there? Right? Well, our backbone is that knowledge-rich curriculum. So as we get into a 4th grade American Revolution unit, you can see that the materials are designed to work together. They're helping both the teachers and the students build that deep understanding of this domain. The teacher's guide, it's all laid out for you. It's covering those 18 lessons in each integrated strand. There's also pausing point days for differentiated instruction, making it really easy to adapt and adopt those different needs for students, and all within that structured 90-minute lesson format. Now, in the activity book, students are going to dive into the content with engaging interactive activities, providing opportunities to explore independently, and then really reinforce their understanding of that topic. And then the reader includes that complex text that builds that vocabulary and that historical understanding. In this unit, students are going to explore the cause of the revolution, the key figures, and pivotal moments. But it's important that those high quality materials and those resources are easy to use. So you're going to see in the teacher's guide that there's a color-coded clear sequence of each component, which makes this feature very user-friendly. And it gives you that clear flow, and it sequences all of the activities in your lesson, which really will help you with prepping. The topics are clearly identified. Grouping recommendations are suggested for you. And then, of course, there is the time and materials, and that's clearly laid out so that you'll never have to wonder if what you're going to need for that next day's lesson. The readers are going to cover critical events such as the Boston Tea Party, the drafting of the Declaration of Independence, and that of historical people of the Revolution, such as George Washington or Mum Bet, who later was known as Elizabeth Freeman. And then some of the readers also include the enrichment materials or enrichment selections that correspond with activity pages within the activity book. Now, this offers flexible options for independent or small group work based on your classroom needs and your schedule. So this lesson is going to begin with a close read, and just like teachers, students want to know why, right? Why are we reading this? So they're given a purpose for reading, and they're also given that big question for the lesson. Now, when you first look at these materials, it might appear that this is a social studies lesson, but as we look at that primary focus, students are analyzing language from the text in order to understand the content, which is social studies based. The integrated strand intentionally teaches the ELA standards through the content. Students then engage with the text multiple times through a close reading routine, and then suggested groupings are provided, but teachers are left to make that decision based on the needs and strengths of the students. So in CKLA, small group is an instructional strategy rather than a time of day, and it's intended to help students access and master grade level content and standards. The reading portion of this lesson is like a jigsaw, or what some people like to call a chunk and chew. Students read a portion of the text and then stop to analyze that text. Throughout, students are answering those inferential, literal, and evaluative questions, all while referencing the text through that ELA lens. Students utilize the topic sentence to find out what Washington did. They use evidence from the text to determine who won the battle on Long Island, or they are learning about personification and then locate examples of personification in the text. And then differentiated supports are embedded so that teachers can scaffold those materials based on the needs of their students. Like Carissa said, word work is vocabulary work in CKLA, so students then begin to do that word work activity. They're familiar with this routine because it's consistent K-5. Again, the text is at the center so that teachers reference the text to develop an understanding of the word confront, and then this extends to make that connection to the part of speech. And a quick check for understanding is always there to help with a completed think, pair, share. And then students are going to engage in practice by responding to the text in their activity pages. Opportunities to cite evidence is a practice that students begin in kindergarten orally. And then the discussion and during and after those texts help set them up for success. And students are also completing timelines to understand that complex content while they're also practicing the sequence of major events. Grammar is taught through that gradual release, so teachers are provided with that objective and the focus of the lesson, and then sentence starters from the text are used so that students really experience that gradual release, the I do, we do, and then working with partners, which then leads to that independent work with the application portion. And this really makes students learning connecting back to that text. Now, when we talk about morphology, students again are supported through gradual release, and then group practice is embedded into the lessons and centered around that text to ensure that students are seeing those connections of those applications. Now, in this unit, students are writing a 5-paragraph cause and effect essay on what led to the American Revolution. So writing skills are strengthened through explicit and integrated daily writing instruction in some way, shape, or form. And writing is done through lessons, but students are still working through the writing process to strengthen their writing skills. So before even writing this 5-paragraph essay, students are introduced to cause and effect, and then this expands into planning for that 5-paragraph essay, which is utilizing the graphic organizer. Students share their essays and learn how to provide feedback to their peers. And then rubrics help students and teachers evaluate their writing. And these rubrics are presented to students even prior to the writing so that they can keep the end in mind. Now, rubrics are provided with assignments in each grade level, so this really sets students up for success with their writing. They know the expectations going into it, and as a teacher, you no longer have to create them on your own, which is a heaven sent. It's also great to have that common language throughout your school when it comes to writing, so it really helps keep everybody on that same page. Now, writing is happening within and across grade levels, so students are building those writing skills with the building blocks, but they continue that writing process within and across grade levels. Now, CKLA covers the full range of assessments, from student performance assessments to end-of-unit assessments to formative assessments and even daily checks for understanding that really allow the teacher to take the pulse on how students are processing new information. All of the data that's collected through the course of a unit gives teachers that insight that they need to make that informed instructional decision. Student performance assessments are at the end of each skills lesson, and these assessments can be paper pencil, and they mirror the same assessment layout that students may see on state assessments so that the test layout itself isn't new to them as they enter into 3rd grade. Now there are options for cold read, there's vocabulary questions, there's grammar, and notice that there's those same scaffolds that Carissa mentioned that are built into the assessments so that students can continue to feel that success. Now, in the upper grades, assessments provide that valuable information on the skills and content that students have mastered. Now, these assessments mimic what students would see on state assessments, and students are reading nonfiction and they're reading fiction passages, and then they're answering questions that are assessing vocabulary, text analysis with that Part A and Part B questions. And then in this particular assessment, students are also asked to write from a different point of view based on the reading and content learned. So a variety of different types of written responses are actually represented throughout all of the curriculum assessments. And these options are also available for digital assessments. And this comes with auto scoring features. And this allows teachers to effortlessly track the students' mastery of standards and content, embedding more targeted and effective instructional decisions. And these digital assessments are available for the end of domain evaluations in both the knowledge and the integrated strands. And this begins in kindergarten, Unit 5. But the format of the assessment also aligns well with many of the state assessments, and this includes embedded text, multiple answers, multiple choice. They give options for drop down and drop and drag. But the digital assessment reporting is what provides the teachers with those great insights, right? Like able to help drive that instruction. So teachers can get results based quickly off of the question and the standard, by questions correct or by questions incorrect, or you can just do specific standards-based reporting. There are also tiered supports. So when we're looking at those tiered supports, there's additional days that are built into each grade level pacing guide called pausing point days. And this allows time for remediation and enrichment. And teachers can utilize the additional materials, those passages and activities provided in the teacher guide. Targeted supports continue with additional enrichment activities that we mentioned before that really help target students that maybe need that extra challenge. The intervention toolkit is also available, and it provides resources that are included digitally to support the skills that the students may be struggling with. So these lessons, they can be printed if needed. They're great if you have additional helping hands in your class because they're very easy to use. The lessons are provided, materials are there to support the lessons they're also included, and there's also a progress monitoring tool. Skill building practice happens through digital activities that are powered by Boost Reading, which are integrated within Amplify's complete literacy suite. And these engaging games align with the CKLA lessons and offer teachers instant feedback on their student success. The third grade skills reinforces and builds on K2 skills, and this is intended to be used however you need to within your classroom. It aligns with the mastery of code and really extends those daily lessons or as an intervention solution, again, depending on the needs of the students. Each lesson follows a familiar sequence that can be taught in one 30-minute lesson or two 15-minute lessons to accommodate your schedule. And then the lessons can also provide a deep dive, and so you can really use them as they see best fit for you and your kids. And then you'll also notice that they're written like other lessons that are developed in CKLA, so there's always that primary objective and that formative assessment along with activity pages. And then there's also additional support through Language Studio, and it supports and extends that core instruction and works great for push-in or pull-out support models. And if you're a dual language school, we have that companion as well. This includes M-Class Lectura, Boost Lectura, and Amplify Caminos. And Caminos is a comprehensive Spanish language arts curriculum that builds those foundational skills, the background knowledge, and vocabulary in Spanish. So at Amplify, we know that curriculum adoption is more than just ordering materials. A team of support is really here to walk with you side by side with teachers and leaders through the entire process. And through the professional development team, you'll have the support that you're going to need for a successful implementation. So not only do we provide on-site PD, but there's also support through our on-demand for professional development that provides program and planning resources, and then of course videos that help model those lessons. So let's circle back to why Amplify CKLA. So not only is CKLA built on the science of reading, but it also engages students and teachers, but from the mouths of babes.
If I was able to describe CKLA in one word, it would be awesome.
Awesome.
Every day we do something different.
This class is spectacular.
Exquisite. Educational.
Amazing.
And ultimately, it's because students love it. So Laura, I'm going to turn this back over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Trisha and Carissa, for all you had to share, and to all of you for joining us today. This may be no surprise to you, but we have plenty more to share with you. So if you want to keep learning, please join our summit in just a couple of weeks. It's called our Spring Science of Reading Summit, the deep links between reading, writing, and language. And you see the link there to register. I'll throw it in the chat as well. And then we also have a podcast, in case you're unaware. Host Susan Lambert, who recently earned her doctorate, so she is now Dr. Susan Lambert, interviews literacy experts to talk about the latest in early literacy research and help you figure out what you need to know and how to apply it with your students. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and we really appreciate you sticking with us after yesterday's issue. You'll be getting the recording to today's webinar, the link to the recording in an upcoming email, as well as your certificate of attendance. Thank you all so much, and take care.